with the recent bannings of Mana Crypt and Dockside Extortionist and Jeweled Lotus, I have learned something very important. According to the Magic the Gathering community, there are certain decks, in casual Commander no less, that are considered completely and totally unplayable. Now, this is a weird one for me, because I don't feel like the lack of the fastest mana in the world means that we don't have access to certain cards, like, you know, incredibly fast mana accelerants like Worn Powerstone, or Hedron Archive, or Strike It Rich, or Skyshroud Claim. Now, I know one of those cards was green, but I used mostly colorless and off-green cards to denote the fact that we've got access to all kinds of things in every color. Black has access to Dark Ritual, and Cabal Coffers, and Cabal Stronghold. Every single deck has access to an extra planar lens, and, you know, if you're getting into white, holy crap, white has some of the best ramp in Magic the Gathering with its planes fetching mechanics. Like, I don't buy this idea that any deck that's not green suddenly can't keep up with green, and that any deck that has a big mana commander can't play without a Mana Crypt. It's a weird thing, right? And while I know it might be low-hanging fruit, this is the tweet that led me to want to make this video in the first place. It goes, I play Atarka World Render, and almost all dragon are 5 mana or more. It's very hard to play a fun game when it's turn 5 and you only have a mana dork or an artifact. So, obviously, I needed to go ahead and challenge myself. Let's go ahead and make a deck that can make sure that Atarka comes out pretty early if you want, and also can play a bunch of dragons on curve. Oh, and the deck has to be $15. Unfortunately for all of you, I already failed this challenge, and this is where somebody could clip this video and be done, because it's way funnier that way, trust me. But no, when I say I failed this challenge, I mean, I'm sorry that in today's economy, I'm not able to fit everything I wanted to fit in this deck for $15. I instead had to resort to building a Atarka World Render for $16. I apologize to all of you for lying in my video thumbnail and my title. I will go ahead and take a moment of silence before we get into the main core of the deck. Thank you. Atarka World Render is a 7-mana beefy boy at 6/4 with flying and trample, and says anytime one of our dragons attacks, it will gain double strike until end of turn. Now, this gives us a pretty obvious outlet for a strategy. We actually don't want to be summoning Atarka really early. We want to summon Atarka after we have an established board, and that means we need at least 2 or 3 dragons on the table able to benefit from Atarka's double strike ability. Even better if those dragons are buffed in some way, making them obscenely powerful so we can benefit from this attack. Ideally, the turn that Atarka swings, we should be either eliminating a single player, or we should be eliminating 2 players by letting Atarka's commander damage deal lethal to one person while our army of dragons deal lethal to another. To facilitate this, we need to go ahead and have a beefy lineup of about 30 dragons, and we need to make sure that we have a deck that is packed to the brim with draw and ramp. And I'm going to go ahead and give you a spoiler alert. This deck is running 26 ramp pieces so that it can flow smoothly, but you'll understand why as we get to the gameplay video. That all said, let's talk about the big dragons we are going to be spitting out. The first in our list of dragons is going to be a classic Shivan Dragon. Now, not only does it come in at a clean 9 cents, which is super easy to fit into the budget, it is one of the OG powerful dragons. At 5/5 with fire breathing, there's a lot of tricks you can pull with this guy, aiming it at somebody with Atarka's double strike, and then pumping 3 or 4 mana into it to knock somebody's health out for usually lethal, but sometimes getting somebody from 40 to 20 life with this thing by just sinking a little bit of extra mana is going to be plenty to make this ability do wonders for us. And since that means that we need to be using fire breathing abilities when we have the ability, that way all of the ramp that we are going to be pumping into this deck has something that we can do with it. Skyship Stalker is a no-brainer. It has a fire breathing ability as well, letting us pump mana into it to give it 1/0. We can also give it first strike and also give it haste, so it can be a wonderful combat dragon before Atarka gives it double strike, and it can get haste haste so that even if it comes onto the board after Atarka, it will benefit greatly from having it on the board the turn it comes down. Just so that we've got some dragons that can also come on the board and immediately do their thing, we'll have Rorik's Bladewing in here as well. Fledgling Dragon is a 4-mana 2/2 dragon with Threshold, so 9 times out of 10 is going to come down late game, and be a 5/5 that has Fire Breathing as well. This is probably the most bang for our buck in terms of dragons, but we do have to hit that Threshold ability, so fetching lands like Evolving Wilds are going to be doing a lot of work here. We also have Thrakkus the Butcher to turn our Atarka's ability into a Quadra Strike ability, since Thrakkus makes all of our dragons double their power when they swing alongside Thrakkus. If we couple that with what Atarka is doing, our dragons get double power and swing for double strike. So a Rorik's Bladewing would swing for 12 and would hit twice. So that's 24 damage for 6 mana. That's a pretty good way to end somebody's career in Magic the Gathering. Then we have Scourge of the Throne that has Dethrone that can give us extra combat steps if we hit the right players. And we have Territorial Hellkite that has flying and haste and costs 4 mana, and it's got a pretty restrictive ability that prevents it from hitting certain people during combat, but we're not super worried about that. What we care about is that it is a 4 mana 6/5 dragon that will be able to punch somebody in the throat immediately. For the dragons in our deck that do not already have haste, Stirring Bard can tap and give one of them menace and haste until end of turn, and also has the ability to give us the initiative, which has, among other things, a few abilities that involve giving us mana that we can definitely use to make up for our lack of mana crypt. Just a quick primer on the initiative so that you know how this card works. It first will give us the ability to fetch a basic land out of the deck, which is super important for a deck that cannot afford to miss any land drops. Then it will give us the ability to scry 2 and create a treasure token on the subsequent turns. And we get a free drop of any dragon if we can hold on to our initiative for 5 turns, or take initiative away from somebody else. Either way, it'll work out for us. There's also draw power on the left-hand side of the Undercity, but we don't really need the target player loses 5 life or the goad ability or even the counters on that side, so I think the treasure token is going to do far more work for us in this environment. Back to hasting our boys, though. Rising of the Day will give all of our creatures haste, and any of our legendary dragons we have will get 1/0 as well, which does mean that our commander will be able to double strike for 14. With Thrakkus the Butcher on the board, our commander will double strike now for lethal damage on anyone at all. Which I guess is the case regardless of whether Rising of the Day is on the board, but I like big numbers, so sue me. And awkwardly, that does it for every card we can talk about before getting into ramp and other areas of the deck. So many of our dragons are going to be pulling double and triple duty to make use of the fact that we really don't have that much of a budget to play with, so let's go ahead and get into all of those extra cards. Otherwise, I'm going to have to sit here and pad out the video for 10 minutes talking about big scaly boys. Now, the draw section of this deck definitely needs to make sure that it has dragons that are pulling double duty like usual, and any of our cards that can draw us cards need to be doing multiple things at once, or drawing us so many cards that they are well worth it. There's only a couple cards that are in this stack of cards I'm going to show you that really don't follow those trends, and it's mainly because we have a very limited budget, and we have to make sure we can use what we have available. So let's begin with a Harmonize, a very simple draw 3 cards. Thrill of Possibility draws us 2 cards and discards a card out of our hand immediately. After that, every card is serving double duty or giving us lots and lots of extra draw, starting with Escape to the Wilds. This allows us to exile the top 5 of our library and play them on this turn and the next turn, and it gives us an additional land this turn as well. This gives us ramp on top of 5 cards of deck looking that is really, really helpful in any deck that lacks draw in other capacities. Dream Pillager also says if it deals combat damage to a player, exile that many cards on the top of your library, and you can cast those until the end of the turn. Usually this will hit for 4 and let us see 4 cards deep. If our commander's on the board, this will hit instead for 8 and let us see 8 cards deep. Then we have Garrick's Pack Leader so that we can draw a card every time one of our dragons touches the board, and Garrick's Uprising is doing that as well, with the added bonus of letting us get trample on the dragons that do not already have it. Peer Past the Veil is a new card from Duskmourn that lets us discard our hand and then draw X cards, graveyards, where X is the number of card types in our graveyard. So if we've got lands and a few creatures and a couple artifacts in there already, then we should be able to draw 3, 4, or maybe even 5 cards off of this in a variety of circumstances. Our deck has 9 sorceries, 6 artifacts, 6 enchantments, and 8 instants, along with all of the creatures, and a lot of our lands do fetch into the grave, so the likelihood Peer past the Veil will let us see 4 or 5 cards is fairly high. Skyline Despot gives us access to the Monarch, which will both make us 5/5 red dragon tokens and also give us extra draw at the end of any turn we can hold onto the Monarch. Even if somebody takes Monarch from us, we are the dragon deck. We have the biggest creatures available. We will be able to take Monarch back from anyone if they yank it away from us. Return to the Wild Speaker will draw us cards equal to the biggest non-human we have, or it will be a straight-up win con by giving all of our dragons a pseudo-overrun 3/3 ability. Then we have Hunter's Insight, which lets us choose a creature we control and draw cards equal to the damage that creature is doing to somebody during this turn. If our commander is out, this is going to draw us 8 to 12 cards, depending on who we hit with. If our commander's not out, 3 mana to draw 5 cards at instant speed is still really, really good. And then we have Nullspine Dragon. When this touches the board, we can discard our hand and draw cards equal to the damage we've dealt to target opponent this turn. Aim your entire army at somebody, smack the Nullspine Dragon into them, and draw 20 cards, and you will be a very happy camper. You might die right afterwards, though, because nobody's letting you survive after you do that to them. I'm just letting you know that right now. As per before, because of our tight budget and the style of deck we are going for, we need to make sure that a lot of our removal ends up actually being dragons. We can't just use any of the best scroll removal cards and only those. So there are a few of those staples in here, like, say, Decimate, which lets us blow up an artifact, creature, enchantment, and land. For 4 mana, that's 1 mana per permanent we get to get rid of, and the ability to remove a Glacial Chasm, which is one of the banes of a deck like this, is very, very important to keep in hand. If you know you've got a friend with a Glacial Chasm, keep this in hand and make sure that you can just blow that thing up before things get too nasty. Return to Nature lets us blow up artifacts, enchantments, and also get rid of cards in graveyards. Abrade lets us blow up artifacts or creatures. And after this, almost everything that we are going to show you has some kind of dragon synergy or just is a dragon. Beginning with the Amethyst Dragon. For 5 mana, we can cause this to deal 4 damage to any number of targets. It's split amongst those, though, so please be careful. If you deal damage to 4 targets, you'll hit 4 targets for, 1 damage. After that, it's a Flying in Haste 6 mana dragon. Not the most mana efficient thing we have available, but it is serving double duty, so it is perfect for what we are trying to do. Horde Smelter Dragon lets us blow up artifacts and then give the Smelter Dragon XO, where X is the artifact's mana value. Opportunistic Dragon can also yank artifacts and even humans away from people, turning those cards off. Chaos Warp, I lied. Chaos Warp is also just staple removal. It just gets rid of any permanent at all on the board, and it doesn't do it by destruction, so it gets around indestructible. Frontier Siege allows us to either ramp by getting 2 green mana every main phase, or allow all of our dragons to become fight spells when they touch the board. Yeah, I think we're almost always going to choose the fight spells thing, unless we're in like a very, very awkward mana race. Steel Hellkite has the ability to give itself pseudo-fire breathing, but the main thing is that if a Steel Hellkite hits somebody, destroy every non-land permanent they have with mana value X, which is, 1 mana blows up their Soul Rings, 2 mana blows up their Talismans, 6 mana blows up their Bolas's Citadel. All of that has to go. I wish we had the ability to use this more than once a turn, but we only get 1, so we're probably blowing up 1 or 2 permanents usually when this hits somebody. Then we have Spit Flame, deal 4 damage to any creature at instant speed, and if a dragon we control enters the battlefield, we can pay 1 red and add this from our graveyard to our hand. So it is a recurable, just a lightning bolt we can throw at things constantly. Glorybringer has the ability to throw a lightning bolt at somebody, or a 4 mana lightning bolt. I don't know what we'd actually call that, but it will hit somebody for 4 damage, hit any target for 4 damage, as long as it's a non-dragon creature, and that will cause us to exert the Glorybringer, which makes it not untapped during our next turn. But that's still pretty good. 5 mana and a 4/4 Flying Haster that only sometimes has to be used as a removal spell is just perfect. Then we have the Foe Razor Regent, a 7 mana dragon that when it touches the board, we can have it fight any creature we do not control. And anytime one of our creatures fights, we can put 2/1/1 counters on that creature at the beginning of the next end step if it survives the fight. So our Frontier Siege is now going to end up being a pump spell. Not that it's really that necessary. Tyrant of Kerr Ridge is a fantastic Shivan Dragon power creep, though. At 6 mana for a 4/5 flyer, it has fire breathing just like we have on Shivan Dragon, but when it touches the board, it deals 4 damage to any target. You can use this to snipe somebody out of the game. You can use this to kill a problematic card on the board. All kinds of things you can do with that 4 damage. Then we have Stump Stomp, which can deal damage equal to one of our creature's power to any other creature, and it is an MDFC, so we have a Burn Willow clearing on the backside. Then we have Emerald Dragon, which gives us access to a green counter spell, a Stifle, where we can counter a triggered ability from a non-creature source, or an activated ability from a non-creature source. Turn off somebody's Soul Ring for a turn. Laugh. And then afterwards, it turns into a 4/4 flying trample creature if we drop 7 or 6 mana into it, which, you know, is pretty freaking good. So 14 removal spells in the single target removal variety, that's honestly a pretty substantial amount that should be able to disrupt most of what our opponents are doing. But in the event that they manage to build a board state outside of the cards we're removing, let's go ahead and get some board wipes in here too, beginning with Chain Reaction, dealing X damage to every creature where X is the number of creatures on the battlefield. Token Dex be damned. Then we have Incinerator of the Guilty, who has a single player board wipe, and we collect evidence X whenever we punch somebody with the Incinerator. If the Incinerator touches you, we then start exiling cards from our graveyard with mana value of X, and then deal X damage to every creature and planeswalker a player controls. Use this to completely nullify a Super Friends deck. It will be very, very funny. Then we have Thunder Dragon, which when it touches the board will deal 3 damage to every creature without flying. The majority of our creatures are dragons with flying, so this really is almost always a one-sided board wipe. It'll be perfectly reasonable in most scenarios. Most of our stuff won't have to die to this, except maybe our Mana Dorks. Those will die. Maybe we should probably talk about those, huh? And now we have the big one, a 25-card ramp section to make this deck sing and hum. It is essential in any kind of big mana deck to make sure that your first few turns are always going to be spent giving yourself mana. And we have plenty of options that aren't Mana Crypt. So let's go ahead and begin with Elvish Mystic. Pay 1 mana, drop this on the board, tap it to add a mana. Cool. Llanowar Elf does the exact same thing. Then we have Utopia Sprawl, which can enchant one of our forests and give it the ability to tap to it for an additional mana of any color. Wild Growth can enchant one of our lands and let it tap for green on top of whatever color it taps for. These will accelerate your mana a lot. They are faster than any other color has access to. Rampant Growth searches our library for a basic land, drops it on the board. Goblin and Necromancer makes all of our cards cost 1 less if they are red or green, which almost all of them are. Dragon Lord Servant does the same thing, but only for dragons. Arcane Signet gives us a mana rock. Sakura Tribe Elder is Rampant Growth little brother that has to kill itself. Reckless Barbarian can sacrifice itself to add 2 red mana to our mana pool. Cultivate gives us the ability to get 2 basic lands out of our deck, 1 on the board, 1 to the board, 1 to our hand, sorry. Carnelian Orb of Dragonkind. This one is great. Any of our dragons that don't have haste, they get haste, and they also get red mana to pay for them. Jade Orb of Dragonkind does the same thing, but it gives it a 1/1 counter and hexproof, making our dragons that much harder to deal with. Honored Heirloom is another 3 mana rock, but it gives us access to graveyard removal to turn off Merit of Clennel Toth decks. Then we have Heaped Harvest. When this touches the battlefield, or when we sacrifice it, we search our library for a land and put it on the battlefield. So for 5 mana, we get 2 lands, but unlike something like Explosive Vegetation, we get to play this on turn 3 in case we have something more important to do on turn 4. We can split the mana up across multiple turns. Then we have Growth Spasm, which grabs a basic land from our library and puts it on the board like a Rampant Growth, but also gives us an Eldrazi spawn that can sack itself to add 1 mana. It's effectively generating us a colorless treasure token. Then we have Overgrowth, which can enchant one of our lands and let it tap for 2 additional green mana. Patron of the Art, which gives us a treasure anytime this touches the board or dies. Search for Tomorrow, which is a really powerful Rampant Growth we can play on turn 1 with its suspend cost. Swashbuckler Extraordinaire is the same thing as Patron of the Arts, except it looks a little different. Also, whenever you attack, you may get rid of 3 treasures and then give that many creatures double strike until end of turn. This is a This is a lieutenant for our commander and also a ramp spell. It's fantastic. Young Red Dragon lets us pay 2 mana to make a treasure token and also pay 4 mana to play the Young Red Dragon afterwards as a creature. Genex gives us a treasure anytime a dragon touches the battlefield. Rapacious Dragon makes us 2 treasures when it touches the battlefield. Realm Scorcher Hellkite has bargain, so we can sack an artifact, enchantment, or token, like, say, the Eldrazi spawns or treasure tokens, in order to get a benefit when we cast this. It's a flying and haste creature that can deal 1 damage to any target, so it's got a removal spell attached to it, but if we play its bargain cost, we can add 4 mana in any combination of colors for follow-up spells. And finally, we have Savage Ventmaw. Whenever this thing attacks, we get to add 3 red and 3 green to our mana pool, and then we can use those on a subsequent phase. Savage Ventmaw is budget Clouth, and it is a fantastic card that basically allows you to get free spells. It's mini dragon omniscience in these colors, and I think it is a wonderful inclusion in any dragon deck that can fit it in. But we also got to talk about the lands in this deck, and we are packing 37 of those, with 11 of them being forests and 8 of them being mountains. After that, we have the dual lands of Game Trail, Exotic Orchard, Command Tower, Cinderglade, Gruul Turf, Mossfire Valley, Path of Ancestry, and Sheltered Thicket. Now, we don't have a way to grab forests out of the deck like we normally would to gain access to the benefits of having Sheltered Thicket, but if we get mana clumped, being able to cycle this out of our hand is still helpful. And once you start upgrading the deck, Nature's Lore can yank this out of the deck super easily. After that, we got the fetching lands. Blighted Woodland and Myriad Landscape act as ramp fetching lands. Promising Vein and Shire Terrace act as really high speed fetching lands, and Terramorphic Expanse and Evolving Wilds are the slower fetching lands we have access to. After that, we've got some utility lands. Kessig Wolfrung, which can allow us to turn Atarka into a one-shot kill by sinking mana into him. Then we have Mosswort Bridge and Spine Rock Knoll, 2 hideaway lands to let us free cast dragon spells. We trigger the Spine Rock Knoll by dealing 7 damage to somebody, and the Mosswort Bridge by having creatures with combined power 10 or greater on the board. Honestly, all of those are super easy parameters to meet. Now, we have already talked about how the deck is decently quick because we have all this ramp. Let's go ahead and talk about how to play it. Alrighty, so turn 1, let's go ahead and look at our hand, and we've got 3 of our dedicated ramp spells and 1 card that can be a ramp spell and 3 lands. Honestly, I think this is a perfect starting hand, so let's go ahead and draw our card, and it is a Promising Vein. Let's go ahead and drop the forest on the board and go to the next turn. Once we hit turn 2, we've drawn a mountain. Let's go ahead and play the Promising Vein, tap 2, and get the Rampant Growth out there to grab a land out of our deck. Once we hit turn 3, we've top decked another land, which would be unfortunate if we weren't in a very good position right now. So let's go ahead and drop a mountain down and tap 3, and let's get that Jade Orb of Dragonkind. We've already drawn plenty of lands, so let's go ahead and use the Jade Orb to get rid of our Promising Vein so that we can yank a new land out of the deck and lower the chances of drawing a new one. Unfortunately, on turn 4, we have hit another mountain, which, while that does suck, it is not the worst thing in the world. So, at this stage, we have a couple of options. We have the Swashbuckler Extraordinaire, which we can use to generate a treasure and get our commander out on turn 5. But we don't have an established board, so we don't really need the Swashbuckler at this moment. So, why don't we go ahead and instead give ourselves a board state that is respectable by dropping down the Realm Scorcher. We don't need the Swashbuckler just this moment. So let's go ahead and drop that down. It's going to get a 1/1 counter due to our Jade Orb, and since it has haste, we can go ahead and swing it at somebody and knock their health down by 5. On turn 4, that's fairly respectable. It is turn 5, and we have drawn yet another forest, which is unfortunate, but if you look at our mana base, we currently have all the mana we need to play our commander. So, let's go ahead and tap 7 mana, let's get Atarka out on turn 5, and let's go ahead and swing that Scorcher Hellkite at somebody for 10 damage. Remember, our Atarka has hexproof until the next turn comes up, and it's gained a 1/1 counter thanks to our Jade Orb, so it's actually very, very well protected. If somebody kills the Atarka, that's perfectly fine by us. We can keep on hitting them with this other big dragon. It is our next turn, and thank hell we drew the Knoll Spine Dragon. We can go ahead and play this mountain, and when the Knoll Spine Dragon comes into play, we are allowed to discard our hand and draw cards equal to the damage dealt to target opponent this turn. This does mean we are going to lose access to our Swashbuckler Extraordinaire, but we have plenty of mana, so we're not really too worried about that. Let's swing the Realm Scorcher at somebody and the Atarka at somebody else. Realm Scorcher is going to be dedicated to knocking out a single opponent, and Atarka is going to be dedicated to two-shotting a different opponent entirely. This means on main phase 2, we can go ahead and play the Null Spine Dragon and discard our hand, and if we choose Atarka, we will now be drawing 14 cards. With 14 cards available and with a land already having been played, we need to make sure that we have something we can do. The only real option we have is to suspend our Search for Tomorrow, which isn't the greatest this late in the game, but at least we can get one card out of our hand with a couple of suspend counters. After that, we need to discard down and figure out what our next move is going to be for turn 7. We're doing plenty good on everything, so we are choosing to get rid of every card except the Opportunistic Dragon because it can yank stuff, Rising of the Day for the haste, Return to Nature so we have a little bit of removal, a couple of ramp spells, an Arcane Signet, and Honored Heirloom, which also gives us access to even more graveyard removal, Path to Ancestry, since we will be able to get scries off of this, Rising of the Day for the haste, and we are keeping Skyline Despot to give us access to more draw in the following turns. After this, we go ahead and pass to the next turn. Now we have a couple of options. There's a scenario where our commander has died at this point. It's very likely somebody has removed it. So let's go ahead and assume that Atarka is gone and we have to pay extra mana for it. This means we don't have access to Double Strike anymore, but it is a very likely scenario as we haven't dropped down a critical mass of cards. We just happen to have very, very strong cards. Due to this, we're going to go ahead and play Path of Ancestry, and we are going to set up for the Atarka ending a player turn. We don't need to worry about getting it out just now. So we're going to pay 2 and get that Arcane Signet out. Then we're going to pay 1, 2, 3 and get the Honored Heirloom out. And then we're going to pay 1, 2, 3 and get Rising of the Day out. This will allow us to hold on to the Return to Nature to remove any problematic card like an Omniscience or a Boldus' Citadel or anything that comes on the board, or, you know, if somebody casts Reanimate, we can use this to stop the Reanimate spell. We have plenty of things we can do with this. We can't use anything else in our hand, but now we have the ability to drop our commander on the board with Hexproof from the Jade Orb of Dragonkind, and with Rising of the Day, it will be able to lethal a player immediately when it comes on the board, since we've already hit somebody once. All that's left to do now is aim the Hellkite and the Null Spine Dragon at the player that we've been trying to eliminate this whole time. If you've been keeping track of the potential damage, this player should be eliminated by now on turn 7. We're going to go ahead and assume we had to use the Return to Nature to get rid of a problematic card, so now we are sitting on turn 8. The Search for Tomorrow will go off and get us a land. And remember that Search for Tomorrow gets the land untapped. I didn't have the chance to get the land earlier because the untap, upkeep, draw thing is an automatic thing, so ignore the Cultivate that was in the hand. We have Scourge of the Throne, actually. We can tap 9 mana to get Atarka on the board, and it gets 1/1 from the Jade Orb of Dragonkind, has Hexproof, has Haste, and 1/0 from Rising of the Day. If it hits anybody, it will deal 16 commander damage. Now remember, one player already took 12 commander damage from Atarka on a previous turn, so we can go ahead and aim the Atarka at them as soon as we enter our battle phase, eliminating that player entirely. With Flying, Trample, and 16 commander damage coming at you, it's very unlikely you're surviving that. This leaves one player open who's probably going to have a board ready to answer us, so we're going to hold on to the Null Spine Dragon and the Realm Scorcher Hellkite to protect ourselves from any possible clapback. Afterwards, we hit turn 9, and since all of our stuff has haste, we really can kind of do the pick of the litter. Any of the dragons we want to play down are perfectly reasonable at this point. But since we have exactly 12 mana right now, we can go ahead and tap everything to get Scourge of the Throne and also Rorik's Bladewing on the board for all the mana we have left. This will tap us out of everything, but it will allow us to have a very critical mass of dragons swinging at anybody. Remember, whoever we sink the Jade Orb into gets a 1/1 counter, and the Rorik's Bladewing gets 1/0 thanks to Rising of the Day. They also both have haste thanks to our Rising of the Day, and both have double strike thanks to Atarka. We get to aim our entire board at the only player that's left, and this should end up in well over 40 damage of life. Even though we haven't focused on them at all throughout this game, eliminating player 1 and 2 meant that we were able to aim everything at the end and deal way more than 40 damage to close things out. Specifically, we are doing over 60 damage with this board state right now, so somebody is definitely eliminated at this point, even if we didn't manage to kill the other 2 players. And this is on turn 9. We've eliminated everybody on turn 9, mathematically. We were able to get our commander out on turn 5, and we were able to keep it protected and also eliminate problematic cards from the board and drew a crap ton of cards. And we still have another draw spell in the hand with Skyline Despot. If we had a different board state, we could just drop the Despot down and the Opportunistic Dragon to control the board and give us an extra draw afterwards, which would then give us access to the Garruk's Uprising. On a following turn, that would allow us to get more draw by using the Amethyst Dragon and allowing us to start powering through our deck. So, all in all, the deck is very fast, it has the removal it needs to solve problems, and it has the ability to clock a player out very, very, very easily. And these are the reasons why I never want to hear it when somebody says that my green deck needed Mana Crypt. It's a ludicrous claim. It makes absolutely no sense to me, especially in a format where not enough people run removal in the first place, so people can just get away with dumb shit. But speaking of dumb shit that people get away with, let's go ahead and talk about what you would do if you had a bit of a higher budget and close this video out. Now, this is a deck that might cost you a little bit to upgrade because that is just the nature of how dragons work, but if you decide to upgrade the deck, let's go ahead and talk about some of the things you got access to. The first thing I'd go for is pumping up the draw power of this deck, and a Rishkar's Expertise is going to do just that. Elemental Bond, Dragon's Horde, and Up the Beanstalk will also increase the draw power of the deck quite a bit, and they are probably the most important pieces I would go for over anything at all. Past that, if you are wanting to make the deck ramp a little better by using some more mana efficient or just better ramp spells, Skyshroud Claim is very hard to circumvent. It's very hard to stop in terms of just power. You play it, you get 2 forests on the battlefield untapped, and then you get to keep going with your turn. You're spending the same amount of net mana as a Rampant Growth because you get 2 of it back, and it's just a fantastic card that feels really underutilized. Worn Power Stone for 3 mana gives you access to 2 mana, and that is a very good return on investment. Fanatic of Ronus for 2 mana gives you access to 4 mana, which is the best return on investment so far. Farseek and Nature's Lore give you access to more dual lands in your deck, and Patchwork Banner is the last mana rock I would probably use, since it allows us to get 1/1 on all of our creatures. Normally, dragons don't need this extra power, but if we are going to go ahead and put it on a mana rock that's basically free and going to be included anyway, I don't see why not. As for the other cards, let's go ahead and go with Dragon Tempest so that our dragons have haste and also have the ability to blow up creatures when they touch the board. Lightning Greaves and Swiftfoot Boots, so we have some better ways to protect our commander, also to give it haste. Beast Within, so we have better Omni removal. Dragonborn Champion gives us access to even stronger draw that is situational. Unnatural Growth is one of the only pump spells I would use on dragons, as dragons uniquely benefit a ton from cards that already see their base power and then double it. Use this alongside Fire Breathing to get double power off of your Fire Breathing. Just instead of using Fire Breathing in combat like you normally would, use it beforehand and then let Unnatural Growth do the rest of the work. Scourge of Valkas is a great removal spell that can also burn players to the ground. Rhythm of the Wilds will give all of our creatures haste and also 1/1 counters if they already had haste. Dragon Speaker Shaman is more situational ramp for dragons. Goldspan Dragon is as well, as it gives us access to treasure tokens. Dragon Hawk is pseudo draw, as it gives us more impulse draw and also a burn spell on top of it. Chaos Dragon is one of the most mana efficient dragons you have access to. Drakaseth is a great removal spell. Clouth is just Clouth. If this card makes impact with somebody, that's it, the game's over. You have enough mana to go through and use like most things in your deck. This is a house in any deck you drop it in. Old Gnawbone gives us more access to treasures, and Earthquake Dragon almost always comes down for a single mana as a 10/10 trampler that we can give haste and double strike, which is just fucking nasty. That all said, I hope you guys enjoy this deck. I think that there's plenty here to enjoy. I think there's plenty of stuff here that you're going to be able to play, and irrespective of not having access to the biggest, baddest, most amazing mana rocks of all time, you do have access to enough to make a deck like this with a giant mana curve work, and work at a very decent speed. Yes, you have to make the sacrifice of adding enough ramp in the deck to make it work, but that's just called deck building. That's just a basic aspect of deck design. If there is a thing that you would like your deck to benefit from, you need to make sure that it is built to take advantage of whatever that thing is. In this case, we have big, dirtily 6 and 7 cost dragons. And the only way to make those dragons work is by having enough ramp to make those dragons consistent. And the only way to make that ramp not feel clunky is to make sure that enough of that ramp says dragon on it in some way, shape, or form, or just happens to be a dragon in some other way, shape, or form. Again, a lot of this comes down to just card knowledge. If you know about more cards that you have access to in the game, then those options will be available to you far easier because you just know what to look for. But if you're constantly worried about playing the best, most important staples of all time, I'm sorry, but EDH is unique to just about every other card game in that we actually have a casual format where you can explore all of the cards in Magic's history instead of just the cream of the crop. Most other card games don't have this kind of benefit, so make use of the fact that in EDH, you do. That said, let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, let me know what I can improve in future videos in the future. And also, if there's something that you want to complain to me about, you're already telling me in the comment section below. You're telling me that I'm a snide asshole. You're telling me I shouldn't be using a VTuber avatar with giant boobas. And I'm sorry that you and your friends are weak, but that's just not a me problem. That's a you problem. Anyway, let me know what you think in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you haven't already, and as always, insert end of video tagline here. Hey, just wanted to give a quick thank you to all of my wonderful patrons who help keep me afloat and help keep this channel going. YouTube and Twitch are wonderful platforms, but at the end of the day, stability is not one of their strong suits. If you want to support my channel, then obviously Patreon is one of the best ways of doing that. Link is in the description. But I do want to personally thank everybody who has contributed to the channel. Those people would be Red Joker, Purple Poundini, Jemshin, Britzkrieg, Jupe the Malignant, Michael, Ravelern, Mabbity Babbity, Astral Frontier, Autumn and Angel, Nixie Chan, Agamotto, Victorian Alchemist, I'm not saying the last part of that, and you know that, Arcton Arclacier, Kiratorian, Dren Hadamata, Jordan M, John L, Lord Bleck, Smiling Game Master, and Fireshard. And everyone else who supports my channel and lets me do what I do full time. This is a dream job of mine that I never believed that I would be able to take full time, and with your help, I've been able to do it. So thank you so very much for that. Thank you for watching the video. I hope you all enjoy, and I hope you all are having a wonderful time. I will see you all in the next one, hopefully.